Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Firstly, I want to thank you all for coming to this talk, inshallah. We hope that Allah makes this beneficial for us. So the speaker today is someone who has a deep academic background with a bachelor's, master's, and PhD. So someone who has been in our position and he knows about situation and also can guide us to. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Dr. Uthman Lateef.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is wonderful being in the presence of such great people as yourselves, and it's been really a long time since I've been back at this university of Brunel. And I ask Allah give success to all of you studying so hard for your exams. Now I think today's topic is one that is so at the core of our human existence, about what is it that makes us happy, and what are the reasons that we have for being happy in the first place. And this, of course, can be juxtaposed with the fact that we also have a lot of unhappiness in our world, a lot of misery and uncertainty, anxiety in our world. And what is the thing that we find in Islam that is supposed to keep us in a state that is happy or content in our self-being? One of the beautiful things about mornings is the fact that mornings are like a symbolism of life itself. So you wake up in the morning and the morning symbolizes a new beginning, a new opening for us. And this is like very reminiscent of what Allah tells us in the Quran in a chapter called Surah Al-Duha, the chapter of the early morning. The early morning brightness is Duha. And Allah begins by saying, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَعْكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Allah says by the early morning brightness, and Allah is taking an oath here, by that scene, that setting, that scenario, the great amazing wonder of existence that Allah makes in the early morning brightness. And this of course was in the context of moments of difficulty and anxiety in the Prophet Muhammad's life. This was when he was being castigated and scorned by his own people calling him a liar and a disbeliever. And this was also contemporary with the fact that the first revelations of the Quran had been revealed, and then there was a delay of around 6 months. And in that period of 6 months, the people who were against him, the mushrikeen of Mecca, were saying, وَدَّعَهُ رَبَّهُ وَدَّعَهُ رَبَّهُ. His Lord has now abandoned him, his Lord has abandoned him. And how many times do we feel like that in life? A sense of abandonment, a feeling of, who am I and who do I know? Who really cares for me, loves me? I was giving a talk, I just came back from Islamabad, and I gave a talk on the bystander effect and empathy. And then another talk on Instagram culture and the challenge of social media. And I gave this example of, let's say people have a lot of followers and fans on Facebook. Let's take Facebook as an example. Let's say you have 20,000 fans or followers, likes on Facebook. And these are so-called friends you have, thousands of them, hundreds of them. And if you ever became ill, how many of them do you expect would visit you in the hospital once you became ill? Let's say you have 15,000 friends on Facebook. Do you think, like, let's say out of 15,000 you get at least 5,000 that would visit you on Facebook? Friends? No. Let's say 1,000 out of your friends on Facebook. What, 1,000? What about 500 then? Come on, that's kind. Out of 15,000. Not 500? Let's say 100 out of 15,000. Not bad. Okay, let's say 50 out of 15,000. Like if you're lucky, maybe 1 or 2 out of the 15,000, right? So we're dealing with misnomers. We're dealing with pseudo-constructs, or what it means to be great in our world, and how happiness is attained through these pseudo-constructs of human greatness. And this is best represented in the idea of the celebrity culture and life. Now in these verses in the Quran, when Allah is saying, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى, Allah is saying by that early morning brightness, by the spring of a new morning, new beginning, new opening, new morning, new situations, new challenges, new times, new opportunities in life. And then وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى, and by the night when it comes in stillness and silence. It means إِذَا كَانَ سَاكِنًا كَمَا يَكُونُ سَكُونُ الْبَحْرِ. The ulama, they say it means like when the night comes like silent like the sea. So there is a moment of contemplation, reflectiveness in the fact that things are quiet. We contemplate better when it's silent and it's quiet. And we're alone to ourselves, and Allah is saying by that early morning brightness and by the night when it comes in stillness and silence, where you have a chance to reflect as a human being, مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى, your Lord hasn't abandoned you, nor does He scorn you. So whatever we feel, therefore, and the Prophet was feeling in his life, that the people are saying your Lord has abandoned you, and Allah is saying, but your Lord hasn't abandoned you. Sometimes in life we require reassurance, acknowledgement and reassurance. How oftentimes we feel, sometimes in life, we feel anxiety. We don't know exactly if we have 15,000 friends, or if we would have 5 people visiting us in the hospital. But reassurance goes a very long way. And Allah is reminding our Prophet very early on in Mecca, right, that this is something that's expected in life. One of the ways that we learn to cope as human beings during moments of uncertainty and challenges is through expectation of the struggle. Allah in the Quran, He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. That Allah will test you and try you and challenge you with some things of loss, and loss of life, and loss of fruits, and difficulties in life. Then Allah is saying, give glad tidings to those who are patient. So what happens therefore, if I'm expecting as a human being to be tested and challenged in some things, it makes a coping mechanism of dealing with that challenge be easier. I can therefore prepare myself for that difficult moment in life. Not to say that I expect life to be exactly as I planned it out to be. Because then if something goes a bit awkward in my life plan, I won't be able to deal with the challenge of it. Because I'm expecting everything to be exactly as I wanted it to be. But life doesn't work like that. I watched a small clip of Jim Carrey, the Hollywood funny man, the comedian, actor. And maybe you've seen it, and he was speaking about, and he says like, I want everybody to try and be as famous as they can. We should make it like a life pursuit. Become as famous as you possibly can. Try and really have all the glamour, all the glitz, all the fame around you as much as you can. And it's building to this crescendo moment. Then it's an anticlimax, because then he then says, because I want everybody to realize that that isn't what makes you happy. Right? So it connects, therefore, the fact that we're pre-programmed now in our world to believe and to think that my way and access to happiness is through self-promotion. If I'm seen and loved by the world, or even if it's a pseudo-construct, like if you have 15,000 friends and nobody, or at least 1 or 2, or even, maybe not even that, would visit you if you're dying or if you're sick. It shows something about what we're living in, a kind of a constructed reality. So what we have is that we create images, and we think that the image is kind of going to generate and engender a sense of self-happiness in us because we've created it. There's a contrast between an image and an ideal. An image is something that we create and it serves us. We create it and it serves us because it's there for our self-promotion. But the ideal is different, because the ideal is something that we didn't create, existed before us. Right? And we serve the ideal. We live up to the standards of an ideal. And that's really where the trueness of happiness lies. That is the message in the Quran. There is an outer form to all of us. It's called Suratul Insan al-Zahir, the outer image of a man. Now what's happening in our world, I think, is that a lot of the drive for self-happiness is juxtaposed with loneliness and anxiety, that people don't feel truly connected with the world that claims to connect them because of social media, and everybody feels connected in our world. But we're not feeling very connected. At a very deeply entrenched personal level, we don't feel very connected with the world around us. What we've done, therefore, we've created the celebrity to satisfy our own exaggerated expectations of what human greatness is in the first place. And then we can't live because it's an unattainable standard of happiness. an unattainable standard of greatness. And it seems so far high up in the clouds, and you think, how can I ever possibly even get there? It's because, and that's the whole point, that that's not where true happiness lies, right? You know, there was an article in The Guardian called Compare and Despair. Compare and Despair. It was about Instagram and Snapchat. It was about these young girls who spend so long, not just for the girls, but also maybe for the boys, who take so long taking images of themselves for Instagram, Snapchat. And one girl said, it takes me an hour, up to an hour, taking the perfect image that I want to give to the world about me. And there was a kind of a great, almost tragic irony in the whole thing, in that she says one of the pictures was about breakfast, and she found herself in a room, beautiful room, maybe in a hotel, and a perfect breakfast. And the sun is shining through the windows, you know, and it's a sunny day, and it's breakfast, and she kind of stages the whole setting and then takes a picture of herself. But it takes her so long, the breakfast gets cold in the meantime. And she then comments herself and says, think about the irony in this, in that the world is seeing me and seeing the scene of me and beautiful breakfast, and thinking, if only I had a chance to eat that beautiful breakfast in a beautiful room, not realizing she couldn't eat it herself because it's gone cold and stale. Like, that's the troubling, tragic irony, right? So we're creating something, but it's not generating self-happiness in ourselves. That means that can't be the real pathway to achieving happiness. Because if you're comparing yourself to others, you're despairing. And so you might think, I'm going to get the best image of myself, and it would have, like, let's say, how many likes? Let's say, I don't know, 20, 30 likes. And then all of a sudden you realize your best friend down the road has 55 likes. And you think, well, that means that I can't be that beautiful, and I'm not as good, and my scene of my bed and the breakfast isn't as good. And you feel less worthy because you're comparing and you're despairing. That can't be the way that we as human beings attain happiness. Because if the only focus is on the outer image of man, if that's the only thing that we have to give the world, then it's very superficial. The outer image of man is something that is changing in flux. I came to this university maybe the last time was maybe, 7, 8 years ago to speak. And I was commenting on the way that there's been mashakil and problems and situations, and I know what happens in a country. But it just shows how everything is in flux, everything is alternating, nothing is static and stays the same, everything changes. But the inner image of man, Surat al-Insan al-Batina, the inner image of man is what is central and key to our human existence. And that's where we attain happiness. And what rests within us, not what rests outside of us. Because the outside you is changing. You look at yourself in the mirror today, and then 10 years, I had to renew my passport. And so it says in the passport, it says on the form that if you look like significantly different to your photograph, you have to take a new photograph. And I looked at myself in the passport, and I thought, well, this is me, and I look the same in this. But I thought, let me ask my mum, who knows you better than your mum. And she looked at the passport, she said, take it into the photograph. like you don't look the same. Right? Allah in the Quran says, اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب وله وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل غيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون حطاما. Allah says the life of this world is play and amusement and rivalry amongst yourselves and increase in competition and wealth and children, like the rain. When it pleases the farmer, and the farmer is toiling his earth, and he's planting his seeds, and the plants are growing, then Allah says the plants they begin to wither away, and you see them, they're turning yellow and they're withering away. And that's us. We wither away through life. We change through life. Happens. But if you focus therefore on the inner essence of man, the inner character of man. There was another article I read about a famous woman in this country, and she says, I love everything about my body. I love my hair, my legs, and my eyes, and everything else. The only thing that was missing in that discourse was, I love my human character. I love my inner being. I love my consciousness, I love my conscience, I love my empathy, I love my values. All of those things were kind of on the back. And what was sent at the front was the fact that I love my self-being, realizing your external being changes. You're not always that handsome, you're not always that pretty. You won't always get the most likes, you won't always have the most friends. And if we therefore if we don't make this as a standard for ourselves, I think it's happiness generating, happiness engendering, realizing my outer being is not the most significant, definitive thing about me. And even that thing, the outer being of man, is different. Every single one of us looks different. We look different. And Allah in the Quran gives us examples of prophets who were the best of creation, prophets of Allah, like Musa alayhi salam. Now Musa alayhi salam was one of the Ulul Azm, one of the great 5 messengers of Allah. Moses. And Musa alayhi salam in the Quran, Allah sent him to Pharaoh, Fir'aun, and Allah says, go to Fir'aun, idhab ila Fir'aun al tagha, he's transgressed all limits, go and speak to him and tell him to come back to Allah. And Fir'aun is kind of preparing himself for that task. And he asks Allah, Allah gave him a stick and the staff, it could have this power and potential with the permission of Allah of turning into a serpent. And Allah gave a miracle, he could put a hand in his pockets, comes out as a shining light. But still he asked Allah, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani, my Lord, and loosen not from my tongue, because Musa would speak with a lisp. That means this great messenger of Allah, Allah selected and chose, would speak with a stutter. How many people have that impediment of speech, in that they struggle in articulating themselves and they stutter or they lisp? But does that mean that there is some kind of, is that a defect truly? Is that a defect? If Allah is mentioning in the Quran that that's something that one of the great messengers of Allah had, that did not take away anything from his greatness, because that's not where greatness lies. Or in the Quran, Yaqub alayhi salam, who was partially blinded, وَبِيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ, crying in grief over his son Joseph alayhi salam, and became blinded or half blind. But does that mean and he was a prophet of Allah, does that mean it's some kind of a defect, impediment? Or the Prophet's companions who were like disabled. Amr ibn Jamuh was disabled, he couldn't walk, he used to walk with a limp. And people would see that, walking with a limp. Does that mean that we're placing all of happiness and greatness in that mode, in that medium of my physical being, my physicality? If there's an impediment there, does that mean that I'm kind of gone down the rank of my task to achieve happiness in life? No. In fact, when he was martyred, the Prophet passed by his body and he says, Inni araka tamshi bi rijlik hari al-sahih fi jannah. I see you walking with this healthy leg of yours in paradise. I mean, everything is in flux, everything is changing, nothing remains the same. How then do we understand human happiness? James Mortier, in his research, The Psychology of Happiness, said that 40% of all happiness is connected to kind of a genetic. The fact that you're predisposed to be the way you are. And in Islam we have something similar like that, right? Our upbringing, our parenting, where you are, all of these have factors on who you become. Bubbly people, cheerful people, happy people, in some ways are predisposed to be like that. And then 20% based upon the demographics of where you live, right? Your family, your mum, your dad, your school, all of these things have an effect on how happy you will be. But then there's a 40%, and the 40% is to do with choice. Is what you do in life that would engender within you a sense of happiness in yourself. And I think it's within that area of the 40% that we sometimes struggle, and we sometimes find ourselves also, that 40%. Now, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, avenue to human happiness, we believe as Muslims, is to do with purpose and goal setting. Purpose and goal setting. We believe if we truly understand our purpose in life, then that would engender within us a sense of self-contentment, rida, contentment. Because I think one of the greatest mishaps of human reasoning is to do with the fact that we can think our way through so many things in life, but we haven't always given enough deliberation on this one simple soul question: what is then my reason for being on earth? What is my reason for human existence? Why do I even exist? Now, all of us are alive. We have a lot to be happy for, the fact that we're still breathing. What is all this breathing, inhaling and exhaling? What is it purpose to do? And it is, we believe, that the human being is tasked and challenged in the Quran to use his human potential to achieve closeness to Allah, closeness to the one that created him, to seek the pleasure of the one that created you. Let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, we have the whole compare and despair phenomenon of people really, I think, struggling and suffering in the world of social media. If they're not that popular, and they're going to suffer, and if they make that as a benchmark of happiness. Now in the Quran, Allah says subhanahu wa ta'ala, "O you who believe, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ وَاشْكُرُونِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ." Remember me and I will remember you. And be grateful to me, don't be ungrateful to me. Imagine the Lord of the heavens and the earth is telling us, and Allah is telling us, remember me and I will remember you. And you think people are existing, some people's whole sense of being is, I want to be remembered by the world. I want the world to remember me. I want to be known by the world. I want people to have placards about me. I want to have my face everywhere. And in being remembered, I will find my happiness. Until maybe they'll remember you, but then remember somebody else with you, or more than you. Or you will be there for a short time, then somebody else will come, more beautiful than you, more pretty and handsome than you. But Allah is saying, whoever you are, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ. Remember me and I will remember you. But Allah says, Hadith Qudsi, أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنَّ عَبْدِي بِي وَأَنَا مَعْهُ إِذَا ذَكَرَنِي. I am as my slave considers me, and I am with him when he remembers me. That Allah is with you when you remember him. Now that's not like people, us imperfect beings, remembering one another, sometimes with malice, with envy, with ill intent, but that is Allah remembering us. There's nothing greater than that as a standard. That if you make it your life goal, I want to be subservient to the one that created me, sustains me, and remember him, that he would remember you. Right? That's something, I think, extremely profound. To be in the remembrance of Allah, and Allah would remember you. There's a thing called rida bil qada, to be content with Allah's plan. Sometimes in life, I think there are some things that we struggle against, but there are things that we shouldn't always be so bothered about. One of them connects with envy, for example. A person could be envious of somebody else's lifestyle, or somebody else's car or home, or children or money, or all these things. But in Islam we realize one of Allah's names is Al-Mun'im, Al-Wahhab, Al-Razaq. Allah is one that provides, Allah bestows, Allah gifts, Allah gives. And if Allah is gifting and giving and bestowing, then that is Allah's decision. That's Allah's choice to do that. If I'm begrudging somebody else because of that, that means I'm having a problem with Allah's decision making for that person, Allah's choice for that person. It could be the thing that Allah gives them is a test for them, could be a blessing for them, could be like a problem for them, could be a test today or a blessing tomorrow, a blessing today, a test tomorrow, it could be anything. But if I'm only focused on somebody else, it means that I'm saying that I can never be happy until that person doesn't have what they have. And if they don't have what they have, then it makes me happy because they don't have what they have. And that's the crime of envy, right? Because you're always looking elsewhere. But if we look within ourselves, I was reading a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl, he was a man who survived Auschwitz and the Holocaust. He survived Auschwitz. rescued just at the point when the war ended, and rescued. But he lived, he survived in Auschwitz. He was an educated man, he was a psychologist, he was someone who was very, astute, intelligent. And he noticed something in Auschwitz, in the camp, Auschwitz and Birkenau, that he saw people, Jews who were taken into the camps. And he said that the people I saw dying more often than others were the ones who lost the will to live. Who had the least expectations of what they would do potentially when they come out of the camps. And so because they had less to live for, their bodies couldn't resist the suffering. And he said they were the quickest to die. It's called logotherapy, understanding life's meaning through suffering. And so he says that for himself at least, and perhaps others also in the camps, that because he said, I would always think of my wife. And I think about always meeting my wife when I come out of Auschwitz. And I think that I want to see my wife's face again. And he says that he uses sensory imagination. Like he would say, I would sometimes smell something in the camps and it would remind me of my wife. I'd smell some food cooking for the guards and it would remind me of my wife. And all of those things, he says, gave me a sense of self-will, a willingness to continue and persevere. And he survived at the end. He wrote this book which has sold millions of copies, Man's Search for Meaning. And I think it really hits home the whole point about understanding in life there is a lot to be grateful for. If we ever see ourselves as always perpetual victims, that we're always victims and we have this sense of self-pity in ourselves, we'll never see the greatness of the day, the brightness of the day. We're always going to live in this perpetual self-created darkness around ourselves, and you can never be happy as a human being. But if you always remember how many things, there's a man who wrote a book called 365 Days. It's a young girl who wrote a book called The Diary of 365 Days also. And it was about this task of the man. He said that he works in America in an apartment, good job, good house, good car, but he wasn't happy. Couldn't find happiness in all of these things because they were kind of run off the mill. They were just routine things. Until he wrote this book, and it's all based upon finding a reason to be grateful for something every day of a year. And he started with the big things. Thank you to my mom and my dad and my wife and my neighbor, my employer, employees. And thank you for this, grateful for this. And it went down to the small things, right? Lips, the tongue to speak, right? And he realized, and he said, I found happiness because he realized there's just too much in the world to be grateful for. And Allah in the Quran is reminding us, أَلَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُ عَيْنَيْنِ وَلِسَانًا وَشَفَتَيْنِ وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ. Haven't we given man 2 eyes? Imagine you can see, right? We almost live with expectation that we're going to see every day. I had a friend near where I live who had cancer, right? And I remember he passed away many years ago now, but I went to visit him one of the days when he was diagnosed, and the doctor said that there's nothing much we can do, although Allah gives life and Allah gives death. And he wanted to spend his remaining days with his family in Pakistan, and so I went to visit him. And I remember so clearly that day, so clearly, I said, like we say, how are you, brother? And he said, Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, as we say in all situations, Alhamdulillah. He says, I woke up today, I could only see with one eye. I was blinded in one eye because of his cancer. And I remember ruminating in my mind that day until today, thinking, have I woken up, do we wake up in the morning with this sense of false expectation, I'm always going to be able to see with 2 eyes? Did I think if I could see today, I'm going to be able to see tomorrow in the same way as I could see today? What about our limbs? How many people sleep and wake up paralyzed, semi-paralyzed? This is why how beautiful it was that our Prophet would say and teach us to say in the morning, Alhamdulillah alladhi afani fi jasadi wa radda alayya ruhi wa adina li bi dhikrihi. Praise be to Allah who has preserved me in my limbs and returned my soul to me and allowed me to remember Him. How beautiful is that? wake up in the morning and that's how you're supplicating, it's not about you, not about yourself. It's about the one that created you. Remembering Him, celebrating His glory, His praise. Someone outside of you, but bigger than you, but has more concern and care for you than you do for your own selves. That's really the essence of happiness, to be grateful people. And you'll find it in many things. A man called Tadeusz Borowski, again, Holocaust, he survived Auschwitz also, Tadeusz Borowski. And he wrote a book, in the last chapter of his book is called The World as Stone. The World as Stone. And I remember reading it some years ago, and he's describing, he survived, he lives in America, and he's going through, going for a walk in a very dilapidated area. And there's bad smells, and it's dark, and there's spray painting on the walls, and there's, people are cussing in the streets, and it's just not a nice place. And he's describing his place as he's going through. Describing it. And so you realize, what's this guy saying? What's the whole point of this whole thing? And at the end of it, this is his point, and he says, you see, I had bad smells, and I smelled bad smells, and I saw bad things. But in comparison to being in Auschwitz, I'm just grateful I can smell. I'm grateful I can just hear. I'm grateful I can see. And although we don't ever put ourselves deliberately in a place where we're going to deliberately see and hear and taste bad things, it was just perspective. In comparison to that, think about where you are. And so our Prophet says, انظروا إلى من أسفل منكم ولا تنظروا إلى من هو فوقكم. Look to those who are under you, not to those who are higher than you. Look to those who have less and not to those who have more than you. Because then you will undermine Allah's favor upon you, and Allah's been so kind to us in so many ways. Think about the fact that yes, you can see. Allah is saying, you gave man 2 eyes, وَلِسَانٌ وَشَفَتَيْنِ, and a tongue and 2 lips. When did we ever think deeply about the fact that we have 2 lips? And all the things we can do with our 2 lips, and the tongue, and what the tongue can do. And Allah is bringing us back to basic things that we thought maybe are not that important, but they are important. This is why the essence of a shukr, of gratefulness, is ma'rifatun ni'am, is to recognize the favors in front of you, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so therefore, one is to do therefore with understanding man's purpose, your own purpose. Number 2, to realize that within a human being are these 2 modes. One is external to you, one is internal to you. And the external one, if that's the sole focus of our being, it will never engender within you a lasting happiness. Maybe for a short time until everything's going to change because somebody else comes along. But if it's internal, there's a lot to work with. We find happiness through being merciful. We find happiness by being empathetic, by showing empathy, by acknowledging others, by making others happy. We feel happy. All of these things, in the smallest of things, we could find happiness. I was just looking over so again, Holocaust, because part of the book I'm writing now is on human suffering, and Holocaust is a small part of the book. So Sophia Scholl, who was part of the White Rose movement on February 22nd, 1943, was executed by the Nazis under the guillotine. And on the day of her execution, she was taken out by the guards to be executed, but it was a sunny day. And so she said these words that the guards recorded and said that it's too beautiful a day to die today. It's too beautiful a day, like it's too sunny today, that this is the day of your death. And I thought, even in that final moment of fragility and vulnerability, still you have this victim here who could recognize and see something that is beyond herself, and that she could pay homage in some respects to the beauty of the day around her. It's about being cognizant and seeing the wonders of Allah's creation around you. Beautiful things happen. Think about children, think about your parents, think about love. All of these things, they stem from Allah's mercy. That our Prophet said, Inna lillahi mi'tu rahmah. Allah has 100 parts of His mercy. وَأَنزَلَ مِنْهَا رَحْمَةً وَاحِدَةً بَيْنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ. And Allah descends, or Allah reveals one part of His mercy between humans and jinn, and animals, beasts, I had some charity workers visit my house from Wood Green, and they look after abused animals, right? They have these pens for dogs and for cats and for rabbits and hamsters and different animals. And they were speaking about, the importance of caring for animals. And I was sharing with them some things from Islam about what the Prophet says, about animals and caring for animals and loving animals, and how Allah, that one part of Allah's mercy is even, for animals, and the animal is scared to trample on his infant because of that one part of Allah's mercy between all things. Then Allah delays 99 parts of His mercy to show mercy to His servants on the Day of Judgment. And so, one of the most beautiful things about living with that purpose, or being subservient to one that created you, is that there is something to look forward to. Now, when Viktor Frankl was speaking in the Holocaust about wanting to see his wife again, even though tragically his wife had died while he was in the concentration camps, he came back home and his wife was deceased. But one of the most beautiful things is that when we think about what is tomorrow's day bring? Tomorrow's day. They say in Urdu, Koi do din asetare nahi hai. Koi do din asetare nahi hai. That no 2 days are the same in the life of the son of Adam. Excuse my bad Urdu. But no 2 days are the same in the life of the son of Adam. That no 2 days are the same. That your yesterday isn't like your today, nor is your today like your tomorrow. Everything is changing. And Allah is saying this thing to the Prophet in the Quran in Surah Duha, that وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. Back to the first chapter we discussed about. So Allah is saying that Allah hasn't abandoned you, right? And what is yet to come in tomorrow's day, in the future, in the next life, and also tomorrow's day, is better than what you have today. Now, if I don't live with that sense of hope, that I'm going to think that maybe even if my day is tough today, it can become beautiful tomorrow. If I'm struggling in my marriage today, maybe tomorrow is a new day. If my kids are behaving the way they are today, maybe tomorrow is a new day. If I failed my exams today, I can work even harder to pass my exams tomorrow. To live with that sense of hope is so key for the sustainability of a person's happiness. Otherwise, we're going to crumble at the first thing, But to always have a sort of self-hope that things will, and inshallah, will improve. And these are different ways, we're supposed to seek happiness, in life. In realizing that, Musa alayhi salam, when he goes to Allah, this is the Prophet of Allah, Musa, and he's going to Allah, and he's in a hurry, and he's rushing, he's quick, leaving his people behind him, Bani Israel. And Allah asked Musa, and He says to Musa alayhi salam, why did you come so quick? Like, what is so fast? What is the rush you come so quickly? And Musa says to Allah, وَأَجِلْتُ إِلَيْكَ رَبِّ لِتَرْضَى. I'm coming so quick to you, O Allah, so you would be pleased. Like coming so fast, O Allah, to make you happy, to please you, my Lord, O Allah. Even in the most testing times in our Prophet's life, on the day of Ta'if, when things were so difficult and they were throwing stones at the Prophet and it was so tough for him that day, the hardest day of his life, he said. But then when he raised his hands to Allah, look at what he says. He says, Oh Allah, Allahumma ilayka ashku da'fa quwwati. Oh Allah, I complain to you for the weakness of my strength and the lack of my resources. And he goes on to say, وَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ بِكَ عَلَيْهِ غَضَّبْ فَلَا أُبَالِي. If it's not that you're not angry with me, then I don't mind what happens to me. Now this is an amazing paradigm shift. Amazing. Because what he's saying therefore is that if we're living only for ourselves, that means I'm going to base everything on my lower self, my egos, my soul. Right? If I'm harmed, then I'm harmed. But he's living for a higher purpose. Oh Allah, if it's true you're not angry with me, then I don't mind what happens to me. That the most lasting point of happiness is not in the transitory, ephemeral fleeting existence we have today, but we have a world tomorrow to look forward to. And even if you find, for example, like, you have, it's quite common amongst atheists that they would say, why is there so much suffering in the world today? Why so much suffering? Why so much bloodletting and killing? And it's true, it's terrible things happening in the world today. But you think, well, when Allah created Adam alayhi salam, the angels asked Allah. They said the same thing. They said, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. Are you going to place somebody on earth who's going to spill blood on the earth and sow corruption on earth? And we remember you and praise you. And Allah says to them, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know what you don't know. I know what you don't know. And therefore sometimes our perspectives and perceptions are skewed because we're only seeing things on a very small, transitory way and level. But we do believe in an afterlife. We do believe that there is a life to come where wrongs would be rectified and these things will happen. So even if you think about, I was in the dentist recently, and I think people hate going to the dentist. I don't know if you guys study dentistry in this university. Any dentists here? So I shouldn't offend any dentists. So I sure can offend them because there's no dentist. I think people are scared of the dentist because you always see the instruments the dentist is using near the dentist. The sharp things, and you can see the injections. You can see it's visible. And when it's visible, it's fear-provoking. It evokes fear inside of me. And so I'm there, and I'm thinking, and they're telling me what they're going to do, and you're trying to brace yourself for all of these things happening. But then, one of the things I reminded myself is of the hadith when our Prophet said, مَا يُصِيبُ الْمُؤْمِنِ مِنْ نَصَبْ وَلَا وَصَبْ وَلَا هَمْ وَلَا غَمْ. The believer is not afflicted in fatigue and pain and grief and misery, not even hatta shawka yushaq, even the pricking of a thorn, except Allah removes his sins by way of it. And it's really a beautiful thing in Islam as Muslims, as a coping mechanism, that we realize everything in life, if we're true to our commitment with Allah and we're trying our best to live a life in servitude to Him and remembering Him, then the reward at the end of the day is far more than the small things we might do in this life. And that's hope generating, because we realize there is an end to all of it. And Allah, of course, promises paradise. But even in the Quran, when Allah says He promises paradise for the believers and Allah describes paradise, then Allah says, and something even greater than that, which is your Lord's pleasure, that your Lord will be pleased with you. So I think there are some things that should rest inside of us that take precedence over the external image of man, which is a sense of realizing the self-purpose. That's very essential for happiness. And secondly, the secondary things in life that we should always be grateful for. Be grateful for your parents, for your children, for the things you see in the world around you, your senses. You can see, hear, smell, taste food. There are people in the world who don't have that privilege. So may Allah make all of us a people of happiness, who seek happiness in the best of ways, in ways that are pleasing to Allah, and never succumb to like despondency in life, and realize that outside of the kind of the temporal frame of what greatness is supposed to be, pseudo greatness, there is something far greater than that. And I think may Allah make all of us recognize that and give us and grant us tawfiq and ability. Jazakumullah khair. So any questions you can